The vice president said he was appalled by the allegations. Why did the president not use this as an opportunity to say something like that? Why does he have to speak through you?
The president has been clear multiple times through myself and others within the administration that we condemn domestic violence in all forms.
He has not said it. Why has he not said it?
I'm the spokesperson for the White House and for the president, and I'm saying it to you right now.
Why does the vice president have to say it? Why didn't he say it?
I'm not sure how I can be any more clear. I think the president has espoused his views on this, and I certainly have echoed and told them for everyone.
He wishes Porter well, and that he believes that people should have due process, but he hasn't addressed the victims of domestic violence at all.
That's actually not true. If you were paying attention to what I just read to you, you would understand the opposite. He literally dictated that statement to me, and so I'm not really sure how that's not the president speaking on that topic. Matthew.
I think we should also highlight what they said about the president there, because Sarah Sanders was asked directly if he believed Rob Porter's ex-wives, and she wouldn't directly answer with a yes or a no question, just said that he supports victims of domestic abuse, but also believes in due process. And when asked why the president hasn't, issued this response that is sympathetic towards the women at all, and instead has been dismissive of these allegations and defensive of Rob Porter, Sarah Sanders said that the president literally dictated the statement that she read at the beginning of the briefing. But I should note, the Oval Office is roughly 30 feet away from the press briefing room. So if the president really believed this sentiment, he could have walked out there himself and said as much. He could have tweeted it. He could have said it earlier today when he was in a room full of cameras. But we have not heard the president be publicly critical of Rob Porter yet.
Quite the contrary, right? On Friday, he beckoned the cameras into the room so he could make that statement praising Rob Porter. And the other thing I wanted to say is this, that the question wasn't just about his public statement in favor of Rob Porter. It was about his history of statements praising men accused of horrific behavior towards women. Mike Tyson, Bill Clinton, back before he was running against his wife, Roy Moore, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly. There are too many for me to count, but you get the point. Steve Wynn. I mean, there's a record here of supporting men who behave abhorrently, allegedly, towards women.
It's also quite easy to believe in due process and also vet allegations and deal with them on a case-by-case basis and see that this is photographic evidence, contemporary evidence. We've got many people saying the same MO, and they were talking to the FBI for these clearances. They weren't talking to just friends, which is corroborating as well.
Well, the other thing is, who's denying the due process? The White House. I mean, it's just a weird complaint, right? You know what I mean? Like, if they believe that he didn't get his due process, then they have only themselves to blame. The reality is, there are two women on the record that the FBI believed, who are trained to determine whether or not people are telling the truth. You have a third person, an ex-girlfriend, who had reached out to these two women long before there was a Trump White House, long before Rob Porter had this job. So it involves a lot of conspiracy theory, like craziness, to even get to the point that this is somehow these women have gotten together to make up these stories.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it also, but Kirsten, ex-wives are not natural allies. Yeah. I mean, the second wife is more likely to be suspicious of the first wife. Right. But they have the similar story. And this girlfriend, whose name we don't know, or we haven't published rather, reportedly reached out to Don McGahn at the White House because she was concerned about Hope Hicks, the White House communications director, who is reportedly romantically involved with Rob Porter to this day.
Yeah, that's right. And we also saw the White House deny there that Don McGahn knew a year ago about these allegations, which is what I believe the Washington Post has reported. But we know for a fact that senior administration officials knew in detail about these allegations, not just the rough edges. They knew in detail about these allegations made against Rob Porter as early as last fall, including the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and yet they did nothing. And the White House has had 5 days to get their story straight on a consistent explanation for who knew what and when and why this was not taken care of sooner. And we are not seeing them properly address that. Instead, they're deflecting, they're creating these timelines that don't match up, and we're continuing to see that from them 6 days after he's resigned.
And by the way, I know this is the smallest offense of the list here, but Hope Hicks, who is the communications director, should have made clear from the beginning that she would not be involved in the response, communications-wise, to this particular case because she has a conflict of interest there.
Do you think that her judgment was clouded, and because the president trusts her so much, that might have created everything we're witnessing here? I mean, obviously the buck stops with the president, but...
Right. I mean, it's very hard to understand the emotional ins and outs of this White House, but obviously she's very close to him. And this is, even if her judgment were not clouded, you just say, I'm stepping away from this for this very obvious reason. Today,
I want to play SOT 4. Today, Sarah Sanders was asked what could have been done better. Raj Shah, the deputy press secretary, said that last week. There was reporting that President Trump didn't like it when he said it, but Sarah Sanders seemed to report it. Let's play that sound.
I think we're looking at that internally and agree that there are things we could have done better, and we're going to continue to look at the process and the role we all played and how we can do it better. But not just in this. I think every day we come to work and we hope to do a better job than we did the day before, and we're going to keep doing that every single morning we come to work.
Those words don't mean a lot if they're not even really trying to improve the process here in terms of what the public understands, because ultimately they work for the public, the American people, about what they knew about this alleged domestic abuser, what the issue was with his security clearance, and why they reacted the way they did.
Yeah, that's right. We did not see any of that. They're saying they do wish they had done a better job. The same thing that Raj Shah said last week, which is a statement that actually got a lot of praise. That was something you don't often hear out of this White House, as a semi-apology almost, or something, we could have done something better. That's not something you often hear. We actually reported that the president was not pleased with that statement that came out of the press briefing last week when he said that we could have done a better job. But you're right. Where are the tangible results of that? Because the White House isn't giving us a clear-cut explanation of what really happened last week and what was the actual timeline. And one of the women, one of the ex-wives, Ms. Willoughby, she wrote an article for Time magazine in which she seemed to suggest, well, let me just read from it. Quote, my friend turned to me and said, this is after Friday's statement, the president of the United States just called you a liar. Yes, she writes, Ms. Willoughby, and so he did. If the most powerful people in the nation do not believe my story of abuse in the face of overwhelming evidence, then what hope do others have of being heard? And this is really one of the worst and most nefarious things about this, is what kind of message does this send to women, to men of America about how seriously the White House takes this?
Well, it sends the opposite message of what they're saying, obviously, which is the problem here. And by the way, he has a real knack also for animating the people that he's going to battle with. The women in this case might not have been so vociferous had he not said, sort of implied, that they were lying. And you get people's backs up, and they will make clear that they're not going to be victimized again.